Hello, you guys. Welcome back. Welcome to my channel. My name is Jai, and welcome. This is Josh Beatty, I think that's his name. And this is the original plot of Monsters Inc. was crazy. I just thought of my first video, so let's check it out. So sit back, relax, let's watch, and let's get into it.
Through multiple changes during development, completely changing the story. From Mike Wazowski almost not existing to Sully having a different name. Here are all the deleted concepts and scenes from Monsters Inc. Let's get into it. To begin with, in 1996, Pete Docter started working on a movie that would later become Monsters Inc. The original title was actually called Hidden City, named after Docter's favorite restaurant, and wasn't the story we love now. The storyline changed dramatically during this time. Docter's original idea featured a 30-year-old man dealing with monsters that he drew in a book as a child, coming back to bother him as an adult. Each monster represented a fear he had, and conquering those fears eventually caused the monsters to disappear. And this concept was actually scrapped and later became known as Monster TV. Now, this original concept was pretty neat to think about. A grown man having to deal with all the monsters under his bed that he feared growing up kind of makes for a good story if you ask me. But I think part of the reason why this was changed is it wasn't relatable to children, which would be the typical audience for this type of content. The idea ultimately manifested into a tale about the monsters and why they scare kids to begin with. In this version of the movie, the greatest source of entertainment was a reality show where monsters go into children's bedrooms and scare them to the amusement of other monsters. And I know some of you out there love reality shows, so this would have been right up your alley. It was set in the 1940s, and the greatest entertainment monster was named Barrymore, which has me wondering if they were named after Drew Barrymore at that time, who excitedly entered the human world to scare children to a live audience. One day he enters and tries to scare a child named Raymond, but to his surprise, he is more fascinated with monsters, and a flustered Barrymore runs away embarrassed. But that is where a scrawny monster named Hob enters the picture, who wants to break into the business and uses Barrymore running away as an opportunity and forces his boss, named JL, named after John Lasseter, to let him replace Barrymore. With no other options, JL relents, hands him the script, and sends him into the room. Once again, Raymond shows no fear and Hob runs away scared. However, later he realizes that he left his script behind and goes back once the show is off to get it back. Upon arriving, he sees that Raymond is reading the script and he is unimpressed. They end up befriending each other, and Hob actually agrees to having this child give him advice for scaring, which leads Hob to being the top scarer at the company. And Barrymore is fired, but Barrymore soon discovers his secret and exposes him. Hob manages to stand up for himself and defends Raymond, but is banished to the human world. In the end, Hob is hired to be a tooth fairy so that he can still visit Raymond. Yeah, this version was completely different than anything that we know and love about Monsters Inc. I mean, this takes a character trying to become a scarer, which is kind of similar, to ending up being a tooth fairy. What? Kind of insane. This version was completely nixed when they decided that it was more practical to have it take place in an energy company rather than a television studio. Pete Docter's follow-up pitch began to inch closer to what would eventually become the final film. In this new version, the protagonist was a monster named Johnson, aka Sully, a scarer who was not...
Wait, are these actual kids in the studio, or is it fake kids?
Not very good at his job. He idolized Ned, another monster who was the scarer of the month, and wants to be just like him. Johnson's boss gives him one last chance to prove his worth, and he ends up getting a door belonging to a little girl named Mary. Ah, you see where it's coming together, guys? Who is always frightened by her older brothers. Johnson ends up going into the room, but the doorknob breaks off and he tries to fix it. Mary, believing that her brothers are playing another joke on her, attacks Johnson, who panics, actually brings her into the monster world. With no other choice, Johnson convinces Mary to remain in his apartment while he goes to work. And you can kind of see the parallels because a lot of these concepts were actually put into the final version of the movie, just with a different story. In this story, Mary, worried about getting caught, creates a monster disguise and goes after Johnson. Hence the monster disguise that we see later in the final film that she's wearing that Sully gives her. Johnson discovers that Mary's door needs to be fixed, so he has to wait. When Mary arrives, he is forced to tell people that she is his niece and is visiting him at at work. Mary finds Johnson's scares laughable and gives a shot herself. To his surprise, she is a very effective scarer, and they make a team with Johnson getting all the credit. As he is loved at work, Ned reveals his true colors and becomes envious of him. While preparing for another scare, Johnson checks out the next room and realizes that it is Mary's room and that the door has been fixed. Not wanting to lose her, as well as his place at the company, he sends the door away and snatches a drawing that she has on the door to hide the evidence. So Johnson and Mary continue to frighten kids, right? Until Mary comes across another kid around her age and she becomes homesick. And at this time, Johnson is made Scarer of the Month. But that's when the character Ned spots all this and realizes what Johnson has done. Upon returning to his apartment, Mary finds her drawing and realizes that Johnson has been lying to her this whole time. She runs away as Johnson regrets his actions. Johnson goes searching for Mary and finds evidence of where she might have gone, while Ned goes to the boss to inform him of what he has discovered. As Mary starts to become frightened of her surroundings, Johnson finds her and they race back to the company to get her home while avoiding the police. Johnson and Mary have a bittersweet goodbye just as the boss, Ned, and the police show up. Johnson sends Mary away on her door, but upon seeing him helplessly be dragged away, Mary unlatches her door as it falls and envelops her and Johnson while shattering, bringing Johnson into the human world. Back in the human world, Mary is no longer afraid of her older brothers as Johnson has become her personal closet monster to get back at them. Johnson and Mary continue to playfully scare each other and live on in an old age together. Now, on the outside of this original storyline, I kinda love it. Is that weird to say? Like, it almost adds up to completely what Monsters Inc. was all about, with this like buddy movie between Mary, aka Boo, and Johnson, aka Sully. And it also doesn't give us the sad send-off. We don't see Sully have to say goodbye to Boo and then possibly see her when she's older. I mean, that's what is hinted at the end of the movie, right?
Mm-hmm. It can always be a TV show make a revival.
But there was one character that's missing in this entire original storyline, and that was Mike Wazowski, which we will get to. While the idea of a monster befriending a human remained the same throughout, there were stark changes made in each variation. Mary went back and forth to being a boy and a girl, and older and younger. At one point, she was Irish, and at another point, she was African American. She would have been roughly 8 years old, but the story team felt that in order to make her defenseless and needing Sully, she would have to be roughly 2 years old. So in the final film, she was young, and she is simply called Boo because of Sully, although we all know her real name was Mary. Johnson, aka Sully, went through several changes as well, having been a janitor, an engine room worker, and a failed scarer. He was also at one point more of a book-smart character with glasses, who was the son of Bigfoot, thus having a legacy to live up to. As they were designing the character, they could not figure out who he was, and finally settled on making him the best scarer, which suddenly put him into focus. Not wanting to make him look like a guy in a suit, they gave him tentacles for legs, but realized that it was too difficult to focus on his expression with such complicated appendages. And so his name was later changed to Mully instead of Johnson, before they finally settled on James P. Sullivan, aka Sully. And as I mentioned earlier, Sully would have spent most of the film alone, with no one to interact with. To that end, the story team invented Mike Wazowski, based on a minor background character that was drawn in early production images. The team loved the idea of a one-eyed, armless sidekick and worked with it for a long time. While initial animation tests were successful, they decided to give him arms for asymmetrical reasons. Sully and Mike also interchanged being Randall's assistant to being separate scarers before they ultimately decided that they would become partners. Which is kind of interesting that originally they were also assistants to the top scarer, Randall. It really shows how much changes went into this movie, because holy crap, Sully as an assistant? Yeah, very weird. Celia May was also added as Mike's girlfriend and was originally a two-headed woman. A rejected concept was that Celia had the abilities of Medusa, hence having the snakes for hair, having turned her ex-boyfriends to stone and putting extra pressure on Mike. At some point, this intensity was diminished and she was made an employee at Monsters Incorporated.
But that's weird. Having two heads, you technically like sisters, and you're sharing the same person, the same guy. How does that work? Do they have the same, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't want to, how can I live like that?
However, Mike was also going to propose to Celia at Harryhausen's before Sully interrupted. This was also cut because it would make his relationship even more strained, and that Boo being a part of the story was enough of a source of conflict already. Which, honestly, I feel like that's such a minor thing. I know we all love, right? And we want to see these people get together, these characters that we know and love, and we're like, why aren't they married yet? But this does make sense. I mean, I do like the concept idea of her being Medusa, though, because it would have explained the snakes on her hair, not just being monstrous, I guess. So that would have been cool to see, and would have definitely added some interesting relationship troubles, I would say. The character of Ned, who I mentioned earlier that Sully looked up to, also morphed into Randall Boggs, who became less of a top-tier monster and more of a second banana to Sully. Earlier drafts also had him dress in nice suits and act as a kiss-up to Waternoose. Not much difference there, would I say. At one point in the original concepts, Monsters Inc. also had a rival company called Fear Co. that specialized in monsters that came out from under the bed. While rival companies are briefly mentioned, they do not play a significant role in the final cut of the movie. However, in Monsters University, there was Fear Tech, and the company itself was finally mentioned in the first season of Monsters at Work, where it is established that they still use scare power, and play a significant role in season 2, where their boss is revealed to be Johnny Worthington III, a character introduced in Monsters University. So again, having these original concepts, as I've talked about on this channel a lot, come to play later in future movies or future projects around the same IP. For instance, Johnny Worthington coming back, and also having rival companies like Fear Tech, which was originally called Fear Co. in the original concepts of the first Monsters Inc. movie. That is always going to be something that fascinates me when we find out these original pieces of content and ideas were kept in archives and later used in future movies. The city of Monstropolis also changed during production. In early development, the city was designed with a more gothic and sinister aesthetic, similar to Halloween Town from The Nightmare Before Christmas. When later drafts established that being scary was just a job for the monsters rather than their natural behavior, the city was redesigned with a stronger resemblance to an average human town. But there were even more changes in this movie, with 5 deleted scenes that were added to the DVD release of Monsters Inc. These scenes never made it to the final cut of the movie. The first scene was called Assistant Sully. In this deleted scene, Sully works with his friend Mike Wazowski as a scare assistant, someone who sets up the doors and screen tanks for the other monsters to actually do the scaring. Mike works alongside Switch, the top scarer, who later becomes the theatrical cut's main antagonist, Randall. Sully doesn't even have a scarer assigned to him, as he works more in the refinery organizing tanks. Again, this concept to me is insane to even think about, knowing the final product that we got in Monsters Inc. Sully being an assistant and more like a grunt man is crazy to me. But there was a reason for this, and it leads me to the second deleted scene. This second scene was called Scream Refinery. In this deleted scene, Sully is incredibly efficient at his refinery job, emptying screen canisters and getting them ready for the next round of scares, all while reading a book. However, as he takes the empty cans upstairs, a black liquid suddenly lands over his eyes, most likely oil. As he stares at himself in the mirror, he is greeted by a much older monster doing the exact same job. The moment non-verbally drives home that Sully has no interest in staying in his position forever and wants something better. Now, when you mesh these first 2 deleted scenes together with the original concept of him being an assistant with Mike, I kind of vibe with it. It shows this story of him wanting to be a better version of himself, that he doesn't want to be stuck in this 9-to-5 job and do it forever. And I feel like that is super relatable to a lot of 9-to-5 workers, including you out there if you're watching this video. It's something that you don't see yourself doing forever, and I think that's really cool that they were going to do this concept for Sully. But I think part of the reason why this was cut is most likely because it wasn't relatable to children. Again, Pixar likes to mesh children and adult stories together to create their films, and I feel like children might not have understood why Sully wants to get out of the job that he's doing. You know what I mean? I think maybe
it's still gonna happen, but make it a children's movie, make it in a fun way. Cause we have there's cartoon movies that follow your dreams. You don't want to be here no more, but you're grateful. But it's time to move on to bigger and better things. But I don't know. But Monsters Inc. was still.
The final product we got is more relatable for kids. I mean, every kid is scared of a monster in their closet, right? There was also a third deleted scene that was called End of Day, and in this scene, Switch asks Mike to leave a door available for him to get one more scare tank filled. Meanwhile, Sully, who recently spoke with the CEO Waternoose, believes he finally has what it takes to be a scarer. Ready to face his fear, Sully walks through the abandoned door and nearly collapses from terror. He conquers that fear of stepping through, but instead of scaring
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
scaring anyone he encounters Boo. Just like in the final film, Sully screams in terror and tries to escape, only to find she followed him back into the monster world. Another good example of like a deleted scene morphing into the final version of the scene we got in the movie, but this deleted scene still existed in a variation of the story where Sully was an assistant. So a lot of things had to change to make sure that the story was very thorough throughout. The fourth deleted scene was called Bad Scare. This scene shows Sully trying to return Boo to her door. However, Switch goes into her room and discovers Sully's hard hat inside Boo's room and becomes suspicious. With it being too risky to return her, Sully takes her back to his home to figure out his next steps. Again, very similar to what they do in the final movie, so it's definitely cool to see that these deleted scenes still pulled little pieces of the story and implemented it in a different scene. The final deleted scene was the original Sully introduction in the movie. Sully's introduction after Waternoose mentions him in the opening scene was originally going to be him roaring at the camera after close-ups of each part of his body, as Waternoose listed what he wanted a scarer to be like, cementing Sully as the top choice scarer. And this would have been a cool introduction. I mean, we still got something like that in the final movie, but it would have been cool to show that Waternoose literally thought Sully was the prime scarer in this original concept of the story. So there you have it, every deleted scene, concept, or significant change from Monsters Inc. The deleted content shows us paths not taken, but the final version is exactly the movie that needed to exist. It teaches us that the best source of efficiency is happiness, and that laughter is what keeps us going, makes us stronger, and keeps the lights on. But what do you guys think? Do you think that Mike Wazowski shouldn't have existed? Should Boo have been a boy instead? Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe. And if you guys enjoyed this video, check out this video right here that I recommend, because you'll also love the deleted concepts from that movie, or check out the entire playlist of deleted concepts from all these other movies. Go ahead and binge all that, because you're gonna love it. And I, Josh Beatty, will see you guys over there. Bye-bye.
Yeah, shout out to Josh Bate. This was a good video. Definitely think they should have, but Monsters Inc. is still top tier. Probably should have, still use it, but use it in a kids way, and probably like, they probably should have just added it and just probably progress within the movie, but it probably would have been too long. But I think they also, it still can happen, because it's Monster University. We see them working as the mailman that they went up. They should have just dived deep to that, but I think it should happen. Another movie, another Monsters Inc. movie, another trilogy or of that sort. You know, yeah. And I think that also was a good idea, the competition of Monster Under the Bed concept, but do we have a monster under the bed in the first scene? Yeah. So yeah. Thank you all for tuning into this video. Have the most awesome day. Stay grateful, stay blessed, and I will be binge reaction to these videos. Cause I can see Lion King, and I'm gonna watch that one.